Hello, everyone. Welcome tonight to Parent Chat. We're so glad that you have decided to join us tonight. My name is Sheri Gazitt. I'm the founder of TeenWise, Teen Life Coach and Parent Coach. But tonight I'm here representing Balance in Mind as a team member. We are super excited to have you here. I think we're on our 5th week. We have changed things up because we've had so many people interested in attending that we are now in webinar format, but that does not mean that you can't ask questions. We have lots of ways to do that. I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight is Michelle Brode. And I say speaker, but really she's our expert, the person who's going to be answering your questions and giving us some information. Tonight, we're going to be talking about big emotions, which all of you, no matter if you have a preschooler or a college student, there are big emotions going on right now, and not just for your kids, but for you also. So Michelle is a behavioral support health specialist from the Youth Eastside Services. She works with students individually and in groups, and parents as well, as she makes classroom presentations on topics such as suicide prevention and vaping, and she supports staff and parents in how to best support the well-being of their students. She is passionate about mental health, literacy, and about parenting, so you are in good hands tonight. So let's welcome Michelle. I'm going to stop the share here. So tonight we are talking about big emotions, and I've been hearing everybody saying their kids are having them, we're having them. So that's what we're here to talk about. So Michelle, take it away.
Great. Yeah, so big emotions all over the place, right? And I guess, one thing I would start off with is that this is one of those, I heard a great analogy this week. We often hear about the oxygen mask analogy, that you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you assist others. But I heard an even better one, which is that think about when you're on an airplane and you encounter some pretty significant turbulence. And everybody gets a little nervous and feels uneasy with the physical sensations they're experiencing. And lots of us have thoughts that can tend towards the catastrophic. And the pilot comes on, and he or she says, ladies and gentlemen, we're going through a bit of rough air. We're just going to turn on the fasten seatbelts for a little while, ask the flight attendants to sit down for their safety, for your safety, and we'll have them get up as soon as we get through this. And the pilot in that moment is really modeling, I acknowledge something is happening. I know how to handle this, and we're going to get to the other side of it. And I think that is a really wise stance for us as parents to work hard to get to. So I want to acknowledge we're not all there all the time. And so part of it is paying attention to our own needs and making sure that we have the capacity that we need to respond like that wise and calm pilot, to model for our kids that we know what's happening, we know how to maintain safety in this moment, and that we trust there's going to be another side to it.
I like thinking of that, like that calming pilot. Let's take that and think about the other way. What if the pilot got on and was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen. You guys be prepared. How would that make us feel as the people sitting on the plane? We would be like, oh my gosh, nobody's in control here. So, which one do we want to be? The pilot who comes on with a soothing, Michelle voice, or do we want the pilot who comes on and makes everybody just go, like the airplane movie, where everybody's chaotic, and that's what we want to avoid.
Yes. So I would say I don't want to just throw this out there as an easy given, but what it takes for that pilot in that moment is that pilot is calling on his or her training. That pilot is calling on the fact that they have gone through hundreds, thousands of hours knowing how to handle a variety of situations. So none of us have been in a global pandemic before. I'm guessing most of us on this call are not over the age of 102, which means we may feel like it some days, but we are not. And that, so we obviously don't have experience with this moment, but we all have experience with getting through challenging moments. And so some of that is for ourselves, getting really grounded in what are some of the hardest things that I have dealt with and made it through, and how have I done that? Because that speaks to resilience. And if we as parents are dealing with kids who are having big emotions, we need to have resilience for ourselves, and we need to have resilience to model and to teach our children as well.
And now with the pilot, you mentioned he has like thousands of hours of training, right? So we as parents aren't so lucky. We don't have parent school where you're in it for years. You don't have the
Or
manual.
manuals.
Yes, the manuals, and every kid is different. So it's like flying a Cessna versus flying a jet plane. We have to have those different ways that we deal with our kids. So, you know, it's really good to have a place like this, a community where we can hear from the experts and we can be a community and support each other to make up for the fact we don't have 1,000 hours and we don't have a manual.
Right, right. So a few things that I think would be in the manual if we had one, and perhaps after this pandemic, we'll be able to write parenting manuals for pandemics.
And hopefully never need it again, yes.
Yeah, that's probably something none of us ever wanted to do. But I think, first of all, it's just really important to know that big emotions are okay, right? Being an emotionally well person does not mean that we never have painful emotions. It means that we have the right emotion for the right situation, and that we know that feelings rise, they crest, and they fall, and that we know that we have the tools to get through them. So that is true from preschoolers all the way through adulthood, but thankfully, hopefully we're not responsible for too many adults in this situation. So we'll focus on the high schoolers or the college kids in our home. And so, you know, I think about with preschoolers, with school-age kids, I think one of the really helpful things we can do as parents is to name the feeling, right? And just, you know, if you've got a toddler who's angry and throwing things, to just say, you are mad. And, you know, and you're not mad at them for it. You're trying to get you're trying to match the level of intensity of their feeling. And so to really acknowledge and name, like, wow, if mad had a color, what would that color be? If mad made a sound, what would mad sound like? What does mad want you to do right now? Right? So there are all sorts of ways that we can engage with that feeling, whether or not we agree with it, it is there. Right? And so we're going to have to deal with it by helping them deal with it. I think when we start thinking about, you know, older elementary kids and, you know, middle schoolers, just to say, like, you know, it seems like you're having a rough morning, or you seem out of sorts, or I get the sense things aren't going the way you want right now. And to just acknowledge that and make space for it. So I wouldn't, you know, just the fact that people are having big emotions is not in itself a concern. It's that we want people to be able to tolerate uncomfortable emotions, which as the adults also mean that we need to be able to tolerate our own uncomfortable emotions and the uncomfortable emotions of the kids in our home.
Mm-hmm. Right, so we're not trying to get rid of them. We're just trying to kind of, what would you say, acknowledge and validate?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, naming it, so there's a term called name it to tame it. And so, you know, very often if you don't know how you're feeling when you're feeling out of sorts, it's like really hard to know what to do with it. And so sometimes, you know, just being able to name it, and again, this is a skill that people learn over the course of their lifetimes. And so We don't expect anybody to be born knowing this. And, some of us didn't grow up in environments where these were conversations that we had. So as adults, we might be getting familiar with this also. But I've found a couple of really great resources online that Balance in Mind, I believe, is going to be putting on their website. And there are a million actually really good workbooks out there right now of like helping your family through the pandemic. But there's one workbook that is specifically for families, and I'm sorry, I'm actually thinking of something from the other workbook right now, where the author goes through and talks about, the feeling sad tells us that we have lost something. And what we need to do in that moment is to acknowledge what we've lost and be grateful for what we have. The feeling of mad tells us that something is wrong right now, and we need to figure out what's wrong and where can I do something about it. And so just kind of looking for the messages in the feelings can sometimes be helpful, to kind of know what is it that, if we're going to take action, where is it going to be? But I also know that we as parents are really quick to jump into problem solving. And so I'm not saying we need to jump into problem solving, but to just listen to the messages of the feelings and take whatever guidance they might offer us. Sometimes I'll say to a kid, do you, do you want to do some problem solving, or do you just want to sit with this feeling together? Because sometimes they don't need our ideas. They don't want our ideas. They're not going to listen to our ideas. But just knowing that somebody is there with them may be the best that we can offer in that moment.
And I can think back to when I was young and when I had those big emotional moments. I didn't always want to talk about it. Just having someone acknowledge that I was crying and having a hard time meant I was visible. Like, that somebody noticed I was going through a hard time. And that was all I needed. And the times when I didn't get that, I remember how I was like, nobody even cares. Like, how were they supposed to know, right? But
Right.
it was just that, like, nobody cares because nobody's seeing me go through this and saying, are you okay?
Yes. I remember as a teenager, like when I would walk out of the room and slam a door behind me, I would sit there and wait for somebody to follow me, right? Like, okay, that was your invitation to come check in with me. How could you not know that?
Right.
Right. And at the times where somebody did follow me, they were probably terrified. That was really important to me. And at the times where they didn't, just like you were saying, it felt like I was not being seen. So it's important to know also as parents that when kids are really upset, we think about this image of when they have flipped their lid, right? When they're just in their downstairs brain, which is all about intense feelings and survival, and that their rational thought has flown away. It is actually not connected, not online. Trying to reason with a kid at that point is worthless. And it's not something that is going to be fruitful for you or for the other person. And so just doing what you can in those moments to try to get somebody back to calm. There's a great analogy that lots of like school counselors have what's called a glitter jar. And so if you picture, a jar of water with glitter in it, when somebody has flipped their lid, and I'm sure we can all personally relate to this, right? It's like the glitter is all shaken up. And what we have to do is let that glitter settle before we can try to have a rational conversation about what went wrong, or it's not okay to talk to your brother that way, or it's not okay to talk to me that way, or how do you think you can get your math homework done today, right? So in those moments, we've got to just like focus on moving their bodies. You want to go for a walk around the block? Do you want to jump on the trampoline? Do you want to do 10 jumping jacks? I always think having little kids get a drink of water, because you cannot be sobbing and drink water at the same time.
Right.
That can be helpful, or just having, things around that help settle them. It can be one of those like sequin pillows where you can rub your hand back and forth and flip the sequins from one side to another. It could be Play-Doh. It could be running your hands under cool water, right? You don't have to have lots of really specific things, but sometimes just being a calming sensory experience where you can be together but not interacting can be a good way to move from that hot moment to a cooler one.
Mm-hmm. And it's good to let them have that moment too, right? Like if they are crying, with my clients, I'll tell them, I am glad you cried for an hour. You got it out. You know, that was good. That was a way to handle it. And you got all those feelings out. So instead of, okay, they've been crying for 2 minutes, we need to move on, you're completely kind of invalidating their feelings at that point.
Yeah. Or just communicating to them you're uncomfortable with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to teach them to feel comfortable with uncomfortable emotions if we can't sit with that.
Right, yeah. And when we get them to the point where they have learned we're uncomfortable, that's when we get the I'm fine, everything's fine, I'm good. They don't want to share those uncomfortable emotions with you because they don't want you to be uncomfortable as a parent.
I will also say, I mean, some of the things we've talked about in the past few moments have been kind of younger kid focused, but with older kids, there's a lot of the I'm fine. And sometimes I will just reflect, like, I hear you saying you're fine. You don't entirely sound like you're feeling fine. And if I can be helpful in any way, please let me know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a leaving the door open. We are generally not the first people that our kids want to talk to when they are feeling upset, particularly if we are, in their mind, the cause of the upset.
Right.
And, you know, I think it's okay to say, I get the sense you're mad at me. I want to let you know I'm happy to talk about it if you want to. But I think it's really just a matter of opening the door and not forcing a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just saying, giving them that space, like, I see you're not really fine. I'm here for you, but not forcing it. I know a lot of parents, they're like, I want to be a good parent, so I'm going to sit there and I'm going to make them talk to me, but we can't make them, you know, and we just have to let them know we are here when you want to talk, and us keeping our calm. Michelle, are you open up for some questions?
Sure.
Okay, so Allison and Val, if you want to hop on, unmute yourself and give us your video and let us know what questions we should start with.
We have someone who asked, what if as parents we are having really big emotions and we aren't so good about naming it in the moment? Can we still model resilience well? Personally, I wanted to take this question because this is my life right now.
I mean, we are all human and we blow it often, right? There is not one parent who is nailing it every day. It's just not happening. It doesn't happen in the best of times, and it is certainly not happening now. So first of all, give yourself some space. Just like give yourself so much permission to be human. I would say that it's not uncommon for people not to be able to name it in the minute. I mean, one of the things we were talking about a moment ago is that when we're having super intense emotions, we actually are not connected to the part of our brain that can explain things and that has language and rationality. And so it's actually physiologically really normal not to be able to do that. And so it's okay to either say, I need a few minutes and walk out of the room. Or if you've already flipped your lid and screamed or slammed a door or whatever it is that we do because we are human, the big thing is really just to repair, right? And to be able to come back and say, I blew it. I flipped my lid. I know that I was tired. I know that I was hungry. I know that I was stressed because I was supposed to get on a work call, or I know that I was stressed because we've tried to have this conversation 5 times and it hasn't gone well. So to just acknowledge that you were not in your best place is a huge lesson for your children. And it's really, really important that every relationship goes through the process of rupture. And it's so, so important that we also be able to teach our children the process of repair.
Mm-hmm. That is key. One thing that I would keep in mind, because I remember this one parent talking to me about this, and I was like, you have to, make sure you repair it. And they were like, I am. And I said, well, how often does this happen? They're like, every day. I'm like, okay, if it's happening every day, you need to get some support, because otherwise you're creating this pattern that they're learning a relationship looks like. This person blows it, says I'm sorry, and then you need to forgive them. And that's not a healthy relationship. So if you are getting to the point where you're yelling every single day, losing your cool, then you need to take care of yourself first.
Yeah, this is one of those oxygen mask moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you are not going to be able to help your kids self-regulate emotionally if that is not within your skill set. And, you know, some of us have not had opportunities to learn that. Some of us have grown up in circumstances that made the process of learning that challenging. And it is always possible to learn it. And so, you know, whether it's finding online resources, or finding support groups or reading up on things. I was part of a parent education thing earlier today with Dan Siegel, who writes lots of stuff about teenagers and the brain, and he has lots of resources for parents. His wife apparently does the same thing. And so, yeah, there are lots of free resources out there, but find the support where you can, because yeah, I mean, we are all human, and we do want to make sure that that it's not this cycle on a daily basis or an hourly basis.
Right. Yeah. All right. Allison and Val, next question.
Yeah, so one of the very first questions that came in, and it's almost more asking the other parents. So if parents want to respond to this in the chat, they could. This is somebody that says, I am here because I was wondering how other parents are dealing with their children acting out due to the quarantine and no schoolwork at home. If they are acting out, what is your child doing? So that could be, you know, obviously parents could be describing, if I'm understanding this right, you know, what kind of behaviors they're seeing at home, in case other parents are seeing the same kind of stuff. We all need to know that we're all in this together.
Right. Yeah. So if people don't mind typing in the chat box, like, is your child absolutely fine? Are you seeing these big emotions? So that we all kind of understand what we're seeing. And a lot of you, if you do share that, you're going to see other parents who are going to share the same thing and experience the same thing. It's good for us to understand that we're not in it alone. And yeah, there's lots of big emotions right now. So Melissa says her kids aren't listening. They're tired, and sounds like maybe there's some sibling fighting going on. Perhaps.
Okay, Val, did you want to do the next one?
Sure.
I love that I just saw in the chat, sorry, that somebody's been fired as a teacher many times.
Yes.
I bet you're not alone.
You know what? And I have to say, that is one of our most important messages. We're not alone. This feels like, and I can't swear, but it feels not so great right now. And having people having this sense that we're not in this all on our own is really powerful. That said, I'm going to get off my soapbox. And our next question is that my daughter has OCD. She washes her hands nonstop. She's a germaphobe. By the way, this was my daughter, is my daughter, which is only amplified during this time. Also struggling with executive function. Oh, there we go. Struggling with executive function. What would you suggest? I have reached out to a couple of therapists, but no one is taking new patients.
You know, I think for people who have, who are experiencing emotions that fall probably outside the range, and it's a fairly wide range of what may be considered an understandable response to this situation. Obviously this is a hugely challenging time, that a lot of the distractions that they may have available to them are not accessible anymore. A lot of the resources that may have been available to them are not available anymore. And so I just want to acknowledge, like, that is a tough situation. And I know that whatever you are doing, you are working hard. And I want to just acknowledge that that's super challenging. A couple of thoughts. So first of all, I do know that Youth Eastside Services does have some openings if people are available to do telehealth. And so that is one option you can explore.
What was that one, Michelle, can you say? again?
Youth Eastside Services.
Okay, you guys have some openings?
Yes,
Okay.
we do, for people who can access us via telehealth. I also know some parents, and I can't say this since the closure, so that's my caveat, but I know some parents have had success with the Psychology Today website. There is a link on their homepage that says find a therapist, and you can type in your zip code, the age group you want to work with, if there are particular issues. So there are lots of ways to sort. And what parents have told me is helpful about that is that you can send out like 20 emails in a short period of time and maybe hear back from a couple of people. So I know that the response rate from a lot of people in private practice is fairly low, and that even before this closure, people were, most practices were pretty much filled, but that can be a good way to reach out to a lot of people in a quick time frame. So.
Right. Okay, next question. Thank you for that.
Let's see. How do I teach my kiddo, 4 years old, to be bored productively? I love this question.
And I would say this isn't just 4-year-olds. This goes all the way up to
I was
teens.
going to say, I need this for my 11-year-old, my 18-year-old.
I have to tell you, this was a classic moment in my house during this shutdown. I heard a line many years ago in a positive psychology class that I was taking, where the line was, when kids complain about being bored, to say to them, be bored with dignity. So I've always used that. My kids are like, I hate that word. And so a few weeks ago, when the boredom had kind of taken over for me, I was just flopped down on the couch and I was like, okay, I am really bored. And my 13-year-old looked at me and said, be bored with dignity.
Yes.
So
I love that.
It is challenging in the best of times to teach our kids to be bored with dignity. And so one of the things that I have at times done, there is on the website, and maybe I can send this as a resource to Balance in Mind also after this, there's on the web, there is it's like Boys Town 100, I don't remember if it's 101 ways to distract yourself or keep busy or whatever. There are going to be a bunch of things on that list right now that are not accessible to us. They are things that would involve things that we can't do at the moment. But I have at times just put a Ziploc bag in each kid's rooms with these ideas written out, whichever ones I was comfortable with, right? So if, playing a video game online was not actually something I wanted to suggest, I didn't put that one in the bag, but I would just say like, hey, we all get bored. If you want ideas, here you go. And so that when they would come to me and be like, I'm so bored, be like, do you want to look in the Ziploc bag? And, often the answer would be no. But then, 10 minutes later, I would find them picking through the Ziploc bag. And, if out of 50 suggestions, they were willing to try one, great. So it's, there are so many ways. Yes, I just saw somebody mention cleaning a toilet. I knew a family where if you said you were bored, then you were assigned a chore. Like, oh, you're bored? There's some laundry that needs to be folded. Oh, you're bored? The dishwasher needs to be loaded.
Right.
So, there are lots of ways you can reply to it, but I mean, you can toss lots of ideas like this in the air, and it doesn't always mean that it flies, and it doesn't mean that it's easy. And sometimes I just say to my kids, like, I know it doesn't feel good, and I'm sorry you're bored.
I'd love to
remember,
hear.
You don't have to be responsible for their boredom either.
Yes, exactly. And I'd love to hear what other people say when their kids come and say, I'm bored. What do you tell your kids? We have the toilet one. And then Anna's saying, great idea to have this mixed of jar where people get to, kind of just pull one out. When my kids were younger and they would say they were bored, I would say, this is great. That means you have some time to do something interesting and different. So what do you want to do with your time? Putting that positive spin on it. And I think the one thing to avoid when they come at you is like to get angry about it. Like, why are you telling me? I don't need, like to calmly divert it to something else and empower them. Like, this is your time. What do you want to do with it?
Yep. And actually, boredom is a necessary ingredient for creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just say like, hey, I think you're on your way to discovering something.
Yeah.
Good luck
You're
with
on
that.
your way. I love that. Yes. And good genius comes from boredom, Rowena says. This is true. And also there's a lot of brain science behind boredom, that it actually allows your brain to kind of create these connections and to process stuff that's been going on. And I think there's something like 60% of your brain doesn't even light up unless it's bored. So, if we want to access all our brain, we better be bored here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's our next question?
Okay, so I have a one-off of a question, which is, I see a comment that says, I say, if you're bored, do this. I don't wanna. Who's heard that before? Well, how about this? And so you go down this path of offering suggestions, nothing is good. How do you get yourself out of the path?
One of the things that very often happens when people are experiencing unpleasant emotions is that they will do everything they can to make sure that you experience that unpleasant emotion as well. And so that is that example, right? As like, when your kid comes to you and says, I'm bored, they're going to make sure that you feel as stuck and as miserable and as out of options as they feel. And so I think it's good to just have one of those one-off lines that you just say, that your kid knows you're going to say, that they get sick of you saying, whether it's be bored with dignity, or there's some laundry to be folded, or whatever it is, because it's in that moment where we're trying to be helpful that we end up making our own lives so much more miserable and not being particularly of benefit to them either.
Yeah. And if you've been in the path and that's kind of been the pattern you've created, it takes some time before they relearn a different pattern. So if you try this tomorrow, you're like, I'm going to do like Michelle said, I got my jar, and they just keep coming at you, you have to stand your ground because they're trying to get you to go back to the pattern they know.
Right.
So I'm just going to add in, I see someone who says, if you pull a slip of paper from the board jar, you have to spend at least 5 minutes doing it.
Interesting.
Love that thought.
Yeah, Anna, what's in your board jar? I would be interested to know what you've got in there. Right, what is our next question here?
Okay, so this isn't, well, I don't know if they truly are asking the question or if they're just being nice. It says, how did you all get to be so awesome? Thank you for doing this.
That's awesome. I love that. Good endorsement there.
Very sweet. But I can do the next one that says, I have a 9-year-old, a 7.5-year-old, and almost a 6-year-old, and they are not sharing or demonstrating any big emotions. But the other day we were watching a family movie and I got emotional and started to cry. It was very interesting when my 6-year-old covered my eyes and told me to stop, and the other two were asking me very concerned, like if I was crying. So even though they don't demonstrate it outwardly, they are still experiencing it big time internally. Just an observation, but I would love some feedback.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful moment, first of all, I have to say, that they recognized that you were crying in front of them. You were teaching them a lot in that moment.
Yeah, I have great appreciation for that also. When the question came up earlier about how people are seeing their kids express emotions, my guess just internally was that it was going to be a very wide range, from like completely shut down to exploding all the time. And so, I think that the extent to which we can demonstrate that we are also having feelings, and that sometimes we get overwhelmed by our feelings, and that sometimes getting frustrated about the fact that there is no orange juice left is not really about the fact that there is no orange juice left. It's just the easy thing to express your frustration about, and just to make space for that, and just be like, I know there are so many frustrating things right now, right? And so in whatever little moments, we can you know, take the opportunity to demonstrate how you know, how those big emotions may show up, whether they come across in big ways or small, I think are really important teachable moments.
Mhm. And it is important to realize that everybody reacts to things differently. And so for some of our teens and preschoolers and middle schoolers, whoever, they may not be having these big emotions yet. They may be like, I'm enjoying this being at home and hanging with my mom and, you know, getting to watch more movies and doing things I like. So we have to keep in mind that what we're feeling isn't necessarily what they're feeling. So for sometimes I'll see parents like, I know that they feel this way. I need to get to the bottom of it. I want them to express it. And that may be true, but it may also be true that they're doing fine.
Yeah, I would say if you see things, the term I use is if you see things coming out sideways, right?
Mhm.
You know, that like, you know, whatever, the smallest frustration becomes an explosion, but the rest of the time they tell you they're fine. That's the time I would get a little suspicious about it. But there are a lot of kids who are feeling a tremendous amount of relief in this moment. And I think that's, you know, super important to acknowledge. And there can also be a range of feelings, right? They may be relieved about some things. They may be heartbroken about other things. They may be worried about other things, right? So it's not just one emotional experience, that there can be a wide variety of them, and they can be, you know, conflicting.
So
Right.
thank you. I just have to comment on one of the comments that came in, which is husband here can confirm wife and daughter love to cry at some Korean dramas. It's a nice bonding moment for them and a great experience when I walk in on them, which is so true. It's find something that brings you together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. For my kids, when I cry, they laugh at me. So
Oh, my kids are so used to me crying. They're
yeah.
like, oh, Mom.
I mean, it is a good bonding experience too, but sometimes I'm like, just let me get a good cry in, but they always interrupt when we start laughing.
So we have a question here, which is, what should I do if I think my teenager is experiencing overwhelming emotions and might be considering some type of self-harm or self-destructive behavior?
Mm-hmm.
This is a really crummy time, and we're all dealing with it. And they say, is there a way you can initiate communication if they don't want to talk to you?
Yeah. So this is one of those really challenging moments, and that as parents in any circumstances, it's going to raise our heart rate and raise our level of concern dramatically. I always think that when there is a safety concern, that we obviously want to pay very close attention to that, and you know, kind of depending upon how immediate you think that safety concern is, that we want to address it sooner rather than later. So I would think it would be really important in a situation where you are feeling concerned about self-harm. And I'm not always 100% clear if people mean like self-injury or if they mean suicidal action when they talk about self-harm. So I just want to acknowledge that it could be one or the other or both. And I think I would just try to approach it as, I'm feeling really worried about you. And I would ask directly, you know, have you been, you know, sometimes when people are feeling as awful as it looks like you're feeling right now, they have thoughts about suicide. Or sometimes when people are struggling as deeply as it looks to me like you're struggling right now, they engage in self-injury behavior. And I'm just wondering if that's happening for you. So you want to ask a super neutral question. And I get that as a parent inside, you are flipping out. You want to grab them by the shoulders and tell them just to stop it and be safe. And you can do that with any other adult, but you can't do that with your kid in that moment, right? And so you just want to try to be as kind of neutral but straightforward as possible. And then just say it. And so, you know, vast majority of the time, a child will say no to a parent in that situation. And so the follow-up question then is, if you were feeling that way, who could you talk to? If you were feeling that day, what would you do? Or if you were feeling that way, what would you do about it? Or, who could you turn to? What supports are available to you? And so things like crisis text line, Teen Link, crisis connections, all of these things that some of them I see are coming up in the chat. And they are also on, I believe, the Balance in Mind website, and they're also available, I think, on most of the schools' websites. Those are all options that are available 24 hours a day right now. And so those are some places to offer to your child. Certainly, if you think immediate safety is a concern, taking them to Children's Hospital, calling 911, you reaching out to Crisis Connections are all places to go. The other thing I would say is, honestly, there's no topic that gets parents more worried than these. And I think that's super legitimate. We just want to recognize that there are feelings behind them that they're trying to deal with, right? And so they're trying to, get out from under overwhelming pain. They're trying to manage intense feelings of guilt, like whatever it might be. And to just say, like, I know this is your way of coping with this right now, and I just feel concerned that it's going to cause other problems. And I'd like to help you find ways of coping with this that don't cause other problems. And so it is challenging, but know that even if your child isn't willing to talk to you, you can reach out to Crisis Connections. You can reach out to Crisis Text Line and ask for some more support in terms of navigating that.
And I would highly recommend, I was just going to say, I would highly recommend for anybody who has a kid who has a phone is to go in there and put these numbers in there for them so that they don't have to seek them out. Like, they may say no to you, I'm fine. But if you have it in their phone, they can share it with their friends. They can call it when they need it without having to take any extra effort to go and try to find it.
Every teenager who walks into my house, I make them put these phone numbers in their phone. And I just say, you might not need it, but perhaps one day you could be a good friend for somebody.
Exactly.
So yeah. I just want to add one more thing. As a parent who has been through that, there are two takeaways I have. The first is that the more you freak out about the emotion, the more it makes it difficult for them. They can't talk to you about it. You, of course, are incredibly worried about what's going on. But if you flip, it doesn't help them. It doesn't help you. You seem like not a safe place. And I know, Michelle and Sheri, you can contextualize this a little better. I just know as a parent, it's such a horrible place to be there. And your natural reactions can work against you.
Yeah.
The other thing is, my second point was, find a counselor for yourself if you can. Even if your child won't go to the counselor, even if you can't do family counseling, you can help yourself be stronger, know how to have a better way, not know how to, but have a better way to process these emotions. And it does get better. It can get better.
Right.
Very wise words. Thank you.
Now we are getting close to, it's already 8:27, if you can believe that. We are running out of time. Someone has had their hand up, and I just wanted to see if, let's see if he's still here. I don't see Allison. Val, can you check and see? We did have one person who had their hand up, but
yeah, it was David, and
looks like he might have had to drop off.
Oh yeah, I don't see him anymore.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay. Okay, so we have a few people who have asked some questions that we haven't gotten to tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to compile those questions, and between me and Michelle and Mina, we'll be answering them in the Facebook group. And you can always reach out to us, balanceinmind@lwsf.org. If someone can type that into the chat, I'd appreciate that, so everybody knows how to do that. Yeah, this has been a great group. You guys have had a lot of talking here in the chat box, which I just love. We're going to keep these up because we really love that there's a sense of community here, that we're able to support each other and just talk freely, not judge each other. That's exactly what this is all about. So what we're going to do is have Michelle kind of talk about 3 takeaways here from tonight. And let me pull up the slide here. This one here.
Okay. So as you can read, it's okay not to be okay, right? That is part of being human. We just want to help kids be able to recognize their emotions and navigate them and know that they can get through it. Secondly, I would say be in it together, right? Anything that you're asking of your kids in terms of being, staying on top of their mental and emotional health are not assignments the adults should be giving to the kids. It's something that everybody in the family should be doing together so that you can model and that you're all living by the same rules, because the fact of the matter is we are all humans and we are all living by the same rules. And I would also just say be proactive. And so whatever you can do to support physical health, mental health, social health, emotional health in this environment, I think those need to be your top priorities every day. And if homework gets done, that's the cherry on top.
Mm-hmm. And all of this is not just about us as parents, but us as people. We have to take care of ourselves. So all of this stuff we're talking about supporting our kids, but we also need to support ourselves and each other and our spouses if we have spouses, because it is difficult times, and sometimes we do go sideways and flip our lids, but we got to take care of ourselves, really. Okay, so as I always try to do, I always try to find a quote that is relevant to what we're talking about. So tonight I found one. I love it because it kind of makes us all so real. Your emotions make you human. Even the unpleasant ones have a purpose. Don't lock them away. If you ignore them, they just get louder and angrier. And this, thinking of ourselves as parents, saying we can't just try to lock our kids' emotions up. We got to deal with them and get through them. Otherwise, it doesn't work very well. So we're just trying to push them down. So let's see. Allison is telling me, don't forget about the poll. Allison, was there a poll that we created, or do you mean the survey? Here we go. Okay. Future topics in process. If everyone can see that, if you can just answer really quick, which one would you like us to focus on? Can anybody see it? Oh, there we go. Okay, some people are weighing in there. And then also, after this webinar is done, you should get a link to a survey that kind of just asks us some questions about this. We really want to continue to do these parent chats, not just right now through coronavirus shelter in place, but throughout the year, because lots of emotions and stuff comes up. So we can do that by having all of you give us your feedback. And also, we are starting to ask people, if you cannot, don't worry about this, but if you can and you have the ability, we are taking donations for Balance in Mind so that we can continue to provide these services and expand how we are helping all of you. Okay, let's see. In polling here, and we will share the results really quick. Okay. So let's make sure, Allison and Val, that we get those down. I don't know if we can get them later, but we want to make sure that we know that. So, and we're listening to all of you. Let us know what you want to talk about. Don't forget to join us in the Facebook group so we can answer these questions that we didn't quite get to yet. Thank you everyone for coming, and our hope is that we will see you next week. What is our topic next week? Can somebody tell us?
Oh boy.
Of course I can. It is the parent-child struggle. If this is not the canonical topic.
Yes. Yeah, if there's anybody that's not having struggles at all, I think I want to meet you, figure out what's going on. All right, good night, everyone. Thanks for coming, and we hope to see you next week.